Hello, everyone. How are you today? Everyone doing well? It's certainly nice to see all of you. Really looking forward to today's teleconference. We're going to be exploring some of the questions that some of you submitted to the Department of Instruction. So I'll be answering your questions. So our first question is, could you compare Reiki healing methods of healing with Rosicrucian methods of healing? Do these methods support each other, or are they opposing treatments? And I'm not an expert in Reiki. However, I have benefited from Reiki, both with in-person sessions and with distance sessions, which that's something new for me. And I very much appreciate the healing energy. Both Reiki and the Rosicrucian healing techniques tap into the unified field, the field of energy beyond us individually. And when we change the field, we change matter. We worked on this a few weeks ago during our teleconference on our inner state. And this is a way to tap into the energy field that sends energy to us, the energy field of which we are a part. So both Reiki and the Rosicrucian healing methods work with that, tap into the unified field. H. Spencer Lewis was so brilliant when he created the meditation for attuning with the Celestial Sanctum. To begin, we see ourselves above the place where we're seated, above the building we might be in, above our city and our country. He is helping us to change our perspective so that we move beyond time and space. And when we do this, this helps us to attune with a high level of consciousness, with a high frequency. And then, for example, in the Council of Solace, which we use this meditation technique that we use to send healing thoughts into the world, when we're in that field, then we send thoughts of peace and harmony and health. We're radiating those thoughts, which contribute to changing the field. Information is coming from that field, from the unified field, and we can be a receiver. And we can also send our energy and our thoughts to that field. So we're a receiver and we're a sender. Groups can have an intention to change the field. And there's been a lot of research on this. The Rosicrucian Order started researching the effects of group meditations many decades ago, and well, historically centuries ago. And more recently, researchers have found that if 1% of the square root of the population of an area meditates, those meditators together can affect things like the crime rate in their community. The Transcendental Meditation Organization has done excellent work on this. And I did the numbers. If it's 1 million people in the place where you live, the 1%, the square root of 1%, it's not 1% of the population, but the square root of 1%, that is 100 people. So in a city of 1 million people, if 100 people get together to meditate, it has been demonstrated conclusively that it can improve the crime rate. The research showed that the national average on that day was a certain percentage. And in some cases, in the communities where these meditators concentrated their thoughts of peace and healing, the difference in the crime rate at that specific time sometimes was double what it was in the population at large. So the half as many crimes were committed. There were other times that it went from, like when the national average was 24% for that particular crime on that day, then where the group of meditators were, it was 18%. So there's been a lot of research on how our thoughts and meditating together as a group can contribute to our communities. Also, in both Reiki and the Rosicrucian tradition, we're reminded that it's not us, it's not we who are doing the healing, that we're instruments. And in the Council of Solace healing meditations that we do every day at noon, anybody who has an issue, it can be a health issue, it could be a challenge with a relationship or financial challenge, or your dog might be sick. In the Council of Solace, when we're meditating in the Grand Temple, and then members who join us meditating wherever they are at the same time, we don't ask what's wrong with the person. We don't ask what the challenge is. We attune with the vibrational frequency of radiant health, of peace, of harmony. So we are feeding information and energy into the unified field. Okay, the next question. Were the original temple degrees written by H. Spencer Lewis, and were they recently updated and modernized? Were the higher degrees written by Ralph Lewis, and have they also been updated and modernized? So in 1909, H. Spencer Lewis had this profound mystical experience, which led him to France, where he met Rosicrucians who had been safeguarding the Rosicrucian teachings and traditions for a very long time. And when he arrived, they asked him if he would agree to reestablish the Rosicrucian Order in the United States, and he did. And they gave him historic manuscripts. And H. Spencer Lewis brought those back to the United States, and he meditated on those. And at first, H. Spencer Lewis presented these in person in New York City, where he was living at the time. And interest grew, and then he initiated other members as Grand Masters, who then presented the same material that H. Spencer Lewis was presenting in other cities, in Philadelphia, Chicago, Vancouver. There was Grand Lodge in Iowa and in Connecticut. So he trained the Grand Masters who would orally present what he had been presenting. And then interest in the order grew so much that he had this material transcribed. And this was all based on the manuscripts that he received, on his very profound initiation, and on his own meditations. So that's the source of the Rosicrucian monographs. During H. Spencer Lewis's life, he edited some of these. He updated them. There was some new scientific information. He updated some of the wording. So he updated them. Ralph Lewis updated the monographs. Towards the end of Ralph Lewis's term as Imperator, he asked Christian Bernard, who was the Grand Master in France at that time, if he would take on a huge project of updating the monographs, which started, I think, about it was in the late 1980s. And our current Imperator, Claudia Matsuko, is updating the monographs. So this is a constant process just to keep everything up to date. And as you can imagine, there have been new scientific discoveries. Our language is very different from what it was in the 1920s. And so another question here is about the higher degrees. Currently, members of the 12th degree write the monographs of the 12th degree. So that's something new. Okay. Next question. How can I successfully meditate on spiritual matters? Again, the most successful, the most effective way to do this is to attune with higher frequencies and higher vibrations. So first we set the conditions, and this is why we establish our home sanctums, so that we have a place where we can go, that we're really, every sanctum period is continuing the last sanctum period. We establish the vibrations there. When we come into our sanctum, we smell the fragrance of the incense. We're looking into that mirror. So first set the conditions, have a quiet atmosphere. And then the way to successfully attune with higher frequencies is through practice. And when we're doing this, if our mind wanders, just gently bring it back. The monographs are very clear that the most effective way to communicate, to attune with other planes of consciousness is through our psychic centers. And we have very effective vowel sound meditations that stimulate the different psychic centers in our being. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. And then another way to successfully meditate on spiritual matters is to attune with the Celestial Sanctum. And we've practiced that meditation many times in our Wednesday teleconferences. So the next question is, please explain the origin of the Rosicrucian Convocation Ritual, including resources utilized and individuals involved in its creation. So the Lodge Convocation was created by H. Spencer Lewis, again, based on the manuscripts that he received from France. And many of these were centuries old. And then H. Spencer Lewis's meditations. The Pronaos Convocation was created by Ralph Lewis. Okay, next question. Rosicrucian students are told that the teachings are based on mystery schools and information H. Spencer Lewis received during his initiation in France. Why don't the Rosicrucian monographs cite the resources and sources of the information? So I just mentioned what the sources are for the monographs, not the 12th degree that current members of the 12th degree are writing and are submitted to the Imperator for approval. All the rest of them come from the manuscripts that H. Spencer Lewis received and his meditations. So those are the sources of the monographs. All right, each day of the week has a vowel sound associated with it. It is recommended to use only the, that's question, is it recommended to use only the vowel sound associated with that day, or can multiple vowel sounds be used each day safely? This is really a good question, and I'm glad it was mentioned. In the very first cycle of monographs, we include the meditation to attune with the 7 major psychic centers. And we suggest that a certain vowel sound is practiced on Monday and then a different one on Tuesday. However, that's just because there are 7 major psychic centers and there are 7 days of the week. So it's a way to focus on those 7 major psychic centers. But although there are other techniques and aspects that are associated with the day of the week, like we have lessons in the, I think they're in the 10th degree, the astral harmonization, 10th or 11th. On Monday, we attune with a certain celestial body. On Tuesday, a different one. This is different. The vowel sounds associated with the psychic centers can be intoned on any day of the week. The only reason they're presented Monday through Sunday is so that we get through all 7. It's equally effective if you have the time to do all 7 at the same time. We're careful not to give so many exercises to do in the morning that a member, especially a newer member, might think, oh my gosh, this is too much for me. I need to go to work. I can't spend hours and hours doing all of this. So in these early meditations, we suggest that, just do the vowel sound that's associated with the first psychic center. Just do that one. If you have the time, though, it's most effective to do them all together. Okay. It is written that H. Spencer Lewis studied and practiced astrology. Why is astrology not taught as part of the Rosicrucian teachings? H. Spencer Lewis was extraordinarily knowledgeable about astrology. When at first he was from the New York area. When he founded the Rosicrucian Order, he did that in New York, and he explained right before he moved the headquarters of the order to San Francisco, this was before San Jose, he said that this was part of the Great Transit, and it was part of his astrological chart. H. Spencer Lewis was very knowledgeable about astrology. In the upcoming issue of the Rose Quad Journal, which, as you probably know, is the Rosicrucian Order's peer-reviewed journal, it's a scholarly journal, there is a paper that I anticipate will be published, but I can't give all the details yet because the final approval has not come through yet, and we'll publish this on the spring equinox in March. But I will say that this paper is really just so intriguing. And here is what it says in the introduction to it. The name of the paper is Mystical Astrology Behind Self-Mastery and Fate with the Cycles of Life. So from the abstract, it says, as this paper demonstrates, a combination of personal and professional challenges led H. Spencer Lewis to disavow astrology in self-mastery and fate out of a desire to protect the Rosicrucian Order from legal, financial, and reputational challenges. That is not the official stance of the Rosicrucian Order. We really don't make a statement about it. However, this paper that I anticipate will be published certainly makes a very good case for that. That there were things going on in the United States in particular that cast, some doubt on some mystical organizations, and H. Spencer Lewis distanced himself from that. So I think that's a very plausible explanation for that. The next question here is, why is the tarot not taught as part of the Rosicrucian teachings? And in 1933, H. Spencer Lewis published 22 cards of the Tarot's major arcana as part of the Kabbalah Unveiled series. And so at one time, these cards are available. We published them, it was 2007, I think, in a Rosicrucian digest that focused on Egypt, because it's the Rosicrucian Egyptian Tarot deck. And you can see the cards there, but these were not continued in the studies. And although Kabbalah is part of our lessons in the 11th degree, the Tarot in particular is not covered. And there are other traditions that are not covered in the Rosicrucian teachings. Some of them, like astrology, I think were purposely removed, and others, I think, is just new information came in, those didn't continue. Here's a question: are the rituals available for review from the Pristine Church that H. Spencer Lewis founded? So in the early part of the founding of the Rosicrucian Order, H. Spencer Lewis was also involved in a church that he established called the Pristine Church. And there was a point where he decided that he needed to focus more attention on the Rosicrucian Order. And so just really shifted where he didn't split his time and energy on the Pristine Church and on the order. He made a decision to focus on the order. And we do not have those rituals. We do have a songbook of it's the songbook of the Pristine Church, but I look for these and I have not found the rituals from that. Okay, the next question. Recently, I learned that Frater Keneth Idiodi retired. I, along with other members, were saddened to hear of this development. Keneth Idiodi is the Grand Administrator, or is the leader of the Grand Administration in West Africa. So let me continue what this says here. Is it possible for him to give a presentation at one of our symposiums or at one of our Wednesday teleconferences? Also regarding Frater Idiodi, I realize this question is perhaps a loaded political query, but I ask anyway. I so wanted to see him named as Grand Master for the African nations. Are you able to respond to this question? So, as I said, Keneth Idiodi is the leader of the Rosicrucian administration, the West African administration in Nigeria. This is an amazingly vibrant jurisdiction or administration for us. Typically, unless it's a Grand Lodge, there isn't a Grand Master. And the administration in Nigeria is not a Grand Lodge, it's an administration. However, recently, Imperator Claudio Matsuko conferred the title of Grand Master Emeritus on Frater Keneth Idiodi, who again has served the order in such extraordinary ways. And he is retiring very soon, and his son Eugenius is going to be taking over. So once Frater Idiodi has a little time to enjoy his retirement, we will definitely invite him to participate in one of our teleconferences. And I'd also like to acknowledge Bridget Idiodi. Kenneth and Bridget are married, and you could not meet two more dedicated Rosicrucians. They have just done so much for the Rosicrucian Order. And again, the Nigerian administration is amazingly vibrant. All right, here's a question. What is the difference, if any, between the master within and the subconscious? I spent some time considering this, and I invite all of you to think about what the difference is, the master within and the subconscious. So I'm going to present what the monographs state and what H. Spencer Lewis wrote. First is The Master Within by H. Spencer Lewis. Assuming for the moment that human consciousness is dual in its expression and that there is evidence of a deeper and more retired consciousness called the inner self, in contradistinction to the material expressive outer self, we find that this inner consciousness is often personalized and generally referred to as the master within. Then he continues. Again, this is about the master within. The belief that there is an inner light in each person that truly guides that person substantiates the mystical idea of a master within, or of a secondary personality that is divine in its essence, omnipotent in its wisdom, and immortal. So that's how H. Spencer Lewis defines the master within. The second temple degree monographs describe our subconscious, because this is the question, is our master within the subconscious? So monograph 8 of the second temple degree says, our subconscious is responsible for all of the involuntary functions of our physical body. Down to the smallest detail, our subconscious devotes itself to maintaining the vital life force within us and to ensuring that no pathological condition will compromise its activity. Without the intervention of our subconscious, we could not accomplish any voluntary action, since it is the subconscious that allocates the energies required for everything we accomplish through our own will. The brain is only a transformer of the psychic impulsions continuously sent to it by our subconscious. Our subconscious is one of the major manifestations of our psychic consciousness. Therefore, the best way of being receptive to the subtle impressions regularly received from it consists of awakening our psychic centers. To achieve perfect cosmic harmonization, we must use our subconscious as an intermediary, since it is the subconscious that constitutes the symbolic portal providing access to cosmic consciousness. When perfect contact is established with the higher planes of cosmic consciousness, our whole being vibrates at a frequency that is totally integrated within the octaves of the spiritual manifestations. All right, our next question. How do I pray to God or the divine directly for my daily need? So Rosicrucians have many tools to do this. We can attune with the Celestial Sanctum. We can attune with the vibrations of what we want to manifest. And again, recently in a teleconference that was entitled Our Inner State, it was an exercise in attuning with those higher frequencies. And we can petition the Council of Solace. Next question. The year 2020 signaled the start of a new world and a new normal for human beings. Is this not an opportunity for a new resurgence of AMORC, where our rituals could be simplified and cryptic enough to be streamed online for members to attend? So some of our ceremonies were transformed into meditations, which I presented last year. There was the Festival of Light meditation around the time of the winter solstice and the New Year meditation in March. And this was with the permission of our Imperator, knowing that people were staying at home, that we couldn't come together. Rituals, though, are different. They involve the vibrations of the temple, the fragrance of the incense, the thoughts and actions of the officers and the members. Our rituals are multi-sensory, they're multi-plane, they're multi-universe. So there are some rituals that will only be presented in person. That's the way they're intended to be presented. And they allow us to tap into that field that I've been referring to in other ways. And I'm just so pleased for the ways that we are able to gather online. And we've been presenting Wednesday Department of Instruction teleconferences since 2015. So it's been almost 7 years, and it's just wonderful to connect with everyone and to have this opportunity. So yes, this past year helped us develop that even more. And some of our rituals will always be presented in person. All right, now there's a related question. Can you explain the reason that members of the order cannot be considered official initiates of the Rosicrucian tradition unless they have actually participated in this initiation ritual in a lodge or a temple? And we do have a monograph that states that. And again, this is because there are certain rituals, and this is all of our initiations, that can only be fully experienced in person. We're an initiatic order, and for me personally, the initiations are the most profound aspect of our tradition, and they have provided the most inspiring experiences for me. And an initiation in a temple is completely different from an initiation in our home sanctum. Okay, our next question. I have a 3-part question. Do Rosicrucians believe in soulmates? That's the first part. The monographs explain that we choose the circumstances of our incarnation. We choose people from the past, from our past lives, who will help us evolve. We choose what family we're in, what nation we're born into, but we choose specific people with whom we may have common lessons to learn and to teach each other. I don't remember ever seeing the word soulmate in the monographs, and what I just described is related to that. So the second part of the question is, why is it hard to unite with them? And what can we do to increase the chances of meeting them in this lifetime? So we can send out vibrations that attract that person. If that person, the person that we see as our soulmate, is joyful and adventurous and humorous, or quiet and sensitive, whatever it is, whatever you see in a soulmate, you can vibrate at that frequency. You can be joyful and adventurous and humorous or sensitive, and it's the level at which we vibrate. Also, on January 19th, the video from that teleconference, as I mentioned, the topic was our inner state, and this included a meditation where we actually work with the unified field to attune with what we want to manifest in our lives. Most of the teleconferences that we present are recorded, and then they're presented on YouTube. It's youtube.com/Rosicrucian TV. Most of them are there. I chose not to put our inner state there. So if you want to see that video, you go into your member online portal, and at the top it says Grandmaster's Messages, and then just find the one that's called Our Inner State. Okay, next question. I probably missed this in my study, but what does AMRA stand for? I know it's about giving back, but what do the letters mean? So AMRA is spelled AMRA, and my understanding is that it's not a combination of those four letters, but it's a combination of sounds, and Ra. And here's what the Rosicrucian Manual says in the Code of Life, the Rosicrucian Code of Life. It's a little bit different than what our modern interpretation of it. It's kind of I don't know if it's the reverse or converse. The Code of Life, this particular point that H. Spencer Lewis wrote, says, as you give, so shall you receive. So it's not as you receive, so should you give. It's give first. And back to the Code of Life. As each opportunity to give is seized upon with utmost impulsiveness, so will future blessings. Doesn't that create an image? Seized upon with utmost impulsiveness. As each opportunity to give is seized upon with utmost impulsiveness, so will future blessings, sought or required, be granted to you by the cosmic. The greater the impulsiveness, with little thought as to personal sacrifice, the greater will be the compensation credited in the cosmic. I have found this in my experience, and this was how I was introduced to AMRA, that first we give. It's not that we receive, first we give. And so as we give, that creates that flow, the flow of energy, the flow of abundance, and things just magically start appearing in our lives. The next question. I thoroughly enjoyed Grandmaster Scott's tour of the Egyptian Museum via Zoom last year. I'm hoping to visit the museum soon. We're hoping you do too. So I'm wondering if anyone has held some of the museum's pieces and documented their vibrational stories. So all of the artifacts are in artifact cases. However, occasionally our team needs to handle the artifacts, maybe to, if we're changing a light bulb in the case, we have to move everything out of the way to be very careful with it. So it's not an official thing that we've done. However, I can share in my personal experience, there are 3 artifacts that really impressed me when I touched them. The first one is an incense burner from ancient Egypt that was actually used in ancient Egyptian temples. And I mean, you're holding on to this, you're just thinking, wow. An ancient Egyptian priest used this incense burner in an ancient Egyptian ritual. And it's more just that awe and that reverence. I didn't feel like a connection with, maybe somebody who had held it or made it, but it just so connected me with that extraordinary time. Another artifact that it's my favorite artifact in the museum. It's a small ceramic piece, and it is a bunch of grapes. And it's from the city that Akhenaten created out in the desert, Tel El Amarna. And the reason they created it was so that when the grapes weren't in season, that there would still be these little grape clusters under the actual grapes that had disappeared. And it's made of faience, which is beautiful. This is like this deep blue and purple. I just love this piece. It has an opening on the back, so it could be hooked on the grape arbor. And there's a fingerprint on it. Now, in that case, I most definitely did feel connected with whoever created this beautiful work of art 3,150 years ago. And another favorite piece that I have is a wedding ring. It's a gold band that looks exactly like so many gold band wedding rings that you see today. And it's like, wow, in some ways, we're not really all that different from people who lived thousands of years ago in such different circumstances. There's another experience that I've had, and this was not in the Rosicrucian Egyptian Museum. It's in our rare books room in the Rosicrucian Research Library, where I was allowed to hold the original Rosicrucian manifestos from 1614, 15, and 16. And these are the manifestos that announce the presence of the Rosicrucians in Europe, that called for the end to the superstition and intolerance that was crushing Europe at that time. And that this small group of very brave people wrote and published. So we hope that you have a similar experience when you see the Rosicrucian manifestos in the rare books room at the Rosicrucian Research Library. We created the rare books room in 2015 for the World Convention that was held then. All of these books were in our vault, and except for me and a couple of other people, no one ever got to see them. So I really wanted to make it possible for other Rosicrucians to see these extraordinary books that we have. We have like H. Spencer Lewis's Rosicrucian Manual and first edition books by Louis-Claude de Saint-Martin and Jakob Burma. It's just an exceptional collection. Okay, next question. When we do the prayer and put our hands over our food, we purify and magnetize it. What other benefits are in this prayer? And explain about all those who are hungry should be associated and receive a spiritual share. So I'll just read from the Rosicrucian Code of Life, the prayer that's suggested before every meal. Before every meal, give thanks to the divine for being fortunate enough to have something to eat. And think of all those who do not have the privilege of eating their fill. If you are alone or together with other members of the order, place your hands above your food, palms down, and mentally or aloud, and say mentally or aloud this symbolic invocation. May this food be purified and magnetized by the vibrations radiating from my hands, so as to provide for the needs of my body and soul. May all those who are hungry be associated with this meal and be given a spiritual share of its benefits. So mote it be. Related to this question is, if I happen to eat meat, I add at the end of the prayer gratitude and forgiveness to the meat and say that their sacrifice was not in vain. And my whole body gets chills and tears in my eyes. Is it wrong? Well, I think only you can answer that question for yourself, and it certainly doesn't sound wrong to me. When we are in the Celestial Sanctum with the Egregore of our order, how far back does the lineage of the Imperators and ascended masters go? So the Egregore of our order includes everyone who has ever been a Rosicrucian, who is now a Rosicrucian, and who will be a Rosicrucian in the future. And in our tradition, there are masters of our tradition, some from ages ago and some from modern times. Some masters of our tradition incarnate on earth, and others are involved on another plane. As far as the lineage of the Imperators, in 1909, H. Spencer Lewis had this mystical experience that I mentioned, and a spiritual master appeared to him and told him that he would seek out the Rosicrucians. And this one thing led to another, and he ended up in Toulouse, France, and he was on the outskirts of Toulouse in an old Roman town called Old Tolosa. And there he met the imperator of the Rosicrucians of that time. And it's believed that this was Count Renaud de Belcasseligna. And here is the account of this person. He was an elderly man who lived in this chateau in Old Tolosa with his widowed daughter, and whose means of living were modest despite his noble origins. So again, it's believed that the Count Belcasseligna was the Imperator of France. His father had been the last presiding officer in the old Rosicrucian lodge in that chateau in Old Tolosa, outside of Toulouse, around 1850. And then the Count and his family disappeared during World War I. The war came through Toulouse and the family disappeared. There was just the two of them, and the chateau was in ruins. It is no longer, but it was in total ruins. So, but when H. Spencer Lewis was in this chateau, the Imperator, this person, Belcasseligna, the Count Belcasseligna, walked him through the chambers in this old lodge, this old Rosicrucian lodge in the chateau. And then he told him to rest in this room afterwards. And H. Spencer Lewis recounted that he fell asleep, or more precisely, he went into a different plane of consciousness, and he experienced the initiation over again. But this time it was with that spiritual master leading him. So his initiation was actually on that spiritual plane with the spiritual master who had communicated with him in New York to seek out the Rosicrucians. And then H. Spencer Lewis's son became the Imperator, Ralph Lewis, and then Christian Bernard, and our current Imperator is Claudio Mazzucco. Okay, so next question. With respect to the 108-year cycle of activity observed by the order, is there a natural cycle governed by cosmic law, or is it deliberately implemented by the hierarchy of the order? I gave a lot of thought to this question, and I would say that it's both. The order is responsive to what people want in the time. So certainly the order is very different now than it was in 1915. We have online monographs, and all of our other publications are online. We meet by Zoom. We have very engaging presentations. And there are natural cycles. There are cycles in every organization, but that's certainly part of our tradition. The next part of this question is, what would happen in 2023 since the present cycle began in 1915? I mentioned that H. Spencer Lewis was initiated into the Rosicrucian tradition in France in 1909, but those Rosicrucians, including the Imperator there, instructed him to wait until 1915 to reestablish the Rosicrucian Order in America. The order had been active in America in the 1700s to the very early part of the 1800s, and probably even another time 100 years before then. So an end of a cycle has to do with transitioning into a new form. The order is much more visible and connected now. So there are changes that don't necessarily mean that the order in 2023 is no longer going to be around. We have experiences like this teleconference, which just would have been unheard of not all that long ago. So the end of a cycle is more about transitioning into a new form. Okay, in the past, it was stated that the order would be active in Europe, for example, and dormant in the Americas. How would such a situation manifest in today's world with the internet and its associated connectivity? So again, we're just much more visible and connected now. Okay, is there a Rosicrucian exercise to reduce intra-ocular pressure, eye pressure? So you need to be very careful with this exercise. And you take the thumb and the first two fingers and you touch your eye so lightly that you barely can feel that you're touching it. And then if you have too much pressure in your eyes, you use negative breathing with the fingers lightly resting on the eyes. So again, I mean, just so you're not pushing at all. You're really just making contact so that the energy is connecting there. And negative breathing is you exhale completely. You hold your breath when the lungs are empty. And then when you breathe in, you don't hold your breath. So that's what you would do for intraocular pressure. Next question, what exercises can be used to treat infections with minimal recourse to antibiotics? So whenever a fever is present, use a negative treatment. If a fever is present, you use a negative treatment. And this is all explained in detail in the 6th Temple degree. Generally speaking, you use the thumb and first two fingers of your non-dominant hand. I'm right-handed, so I use my left hand, and you place them on the dominant side of your spinal column. So again, I'm right-handed. So the right side of my body, we're going to call the dominant side. And you put it at the level of the vertebrae that don't swivel when the neck is turned. So I take my non-dominant hand, and you can do that now. If you're right-handed, it's your left hand. If you're left-handed, it's your right hand. And you put it on the opposite side, along the side of your spinal column. And you put it at the place that when you're at the vertebra, that when you move your neck, it's the vertebra that don't swivel when the neck is turned. The third cervical ganglion, or the first thoracic ganglion, allows treatment of about 70% of the disorders that we may suffer from. And because of its connection with the bloodstream, it also helps to neutralize countless other disorders. So again, in the 6th Temple degree, we go into detail about where to place our hands on different places on our body. This was what I just told you now is a negative treatment because an infection creates a fever. So if a fever is present, you use the negative treatment. If not, then you use just the opposite. I would use my dominant hand and I would put it on the non-dominant side of my spinal column. Okay. What is the order's? Oh, wait, I had more on this. Okay, also, for anything with an infection, take deep neutral breaths for 5 to 10 minutes. Deep neutral breaths, so you don't hold your breath on the inhalation or the exhalation. You just breathe in deeply, and then you can wait 30 minutes between treatments. If you aren't sure if you need a positive or a negative treatment, you can do a dual treatment. And this is very simple. We can do this now for just a moment. So have your back comfortably straight, your feet together on the floor. So your feet are touching, the insides of your feet are touching, you know, not like this, but have your feet next to each other. Interlace your fingers over the solar plexus, which is just above the navel, and take deep neutral breaths for 5 to 10 minutes. So we'll do this for like 30 seconds. Okay. So again, you do that for 5 to 10 minutes. This helps. The dual treatment helps if you don't know if you need a positive or a negative, and just helps overall. Also, if you have an infection, drink lots of water, and depending on, garlic is also a very effective thing to ingest for an infection. The next question, what is the view of the order about transition, burial, and cremation? And about after transition, how long a soul reincarnates. So in the 8th degree, we explore transition, and it's up to each member whether we want to be buried or cremated. Here's what an 8th degree monograph says about transition. The soul, a spiritual combination of the human soul and an aspect of the universal soul, and the soul personality. So the soul and the soul personality leave the physical body with the last breath, taking with it the psychic body and causing the silver cord to be severed. During the 3 days following death, the soul leaves the psychic body and continues its spiritual ascent by itself. After having left the psychic body together, the human soul and the soul personality separate and are once again independent, as they were before infusing the body of the newborn infinite. According to Rosicrucian tradition, the soul personality reincarnates about every 144 years, with 144 years elapsing between rebirths. So if you were born in 1950 and you live until the year 2030, you would still have 64 years to go before your next incarnation, which would occur in 2094. So 144 years from 1950. If you were born in 1950, your previous incarnation began in 1806. Okay, next question. I'm a new member since December 2021. Well, welcome. As to avoid being interrupted during teachings, in telling work colleagues and friends, I will be attending teachings on Wednesday afternoon, Monday evening, studies on Thursdays. I always leave it at teachings. So what is considered traditional teachings? And I was hoping to get a list of what is best and okay to share and what is to be kept only with Rosicrucian members. So if you see something in a book or online, not in your online member portal, but if you see it on YouTube, you see it in a book or a Rosicrucian magazine, you can share it. And I can appreciate you being discreet. All of us live in areas that are more or less open to different traditions. So if somebody ask you, you know, why are you always busy every Thursday night or Wednesday afternoon or whatever it is, just kind of like you've done, judge, you know, are they asking me because they're thinking something's weird? So just give the basic details. Or are they asking because maybe they would want to be involved in something that they might find interesting? Then you can give more details. So in my own experience, I'm always, you know, I just judge. I try to figure out why the person was asking, and I don't go into a lot of details in the first time that I discuss it. But if you find someone that you think could benefit from the Rosicrucian tradition, you could find a way to just naturally mention, oh, I saw this great video on YouTube, or there's this magazine that's free online called the Rosicrucian Digest, something like that. Okay. So here are a few more questions. If I get behind in my studies, is it wrong if I just take on where I stopped after, say, a few months? It'll be helpful to you to just keep moving forward. And as some of you may recall, I mentioned that I asked Lonnie Edwards this question, like, what if somebody's feeling bad about themselves because they got behind in their studies? And he said, remember what you have accomplished so far. Hold on to that. Hold on to that thought. Well, I did find the Rosicrucian Order. I did apply for membership. I have studied some of the lessons, and just build on that. Remember the part that's worked well for you. Next question, when seeking for the truth, how can one be assured that what is found is AMORC? Well, you would know this through your Rosicrucian monographs, through Rosicrucian affiliated bodies, through our Department of Instruction teleconferences. If there is, what can I do if there's no physical lodge or other affiliated body available? Please join us on teleconferences like this. We also have quarterly symposiums. There are many ways to connect with members. Rosicrucian community is available to all active members. This is a great way. You just go online and there are all these different groups within rosicruciancommunity.org. There's a group for new members, for members in different states and provinces. There are many ways to connect. Can one travel to other Grand Lodges? For example, the Dutch Grand Lodge. Yes, all active members of AMORC can participate in activities in any jurisdiction around the world. You just show your membership card that shows you're an active member. Question here, one might change because of the teachings. What if my surroundings or the people around me disapprove? Is it possible that others will disapprove? Well, we outgrow things. We are changing our vibrational frequency. Sometimes we outgrow environments. Sometimes we outgrow people. So it's possible that others who are used to you being a certain way may find it uncomfortable as you work on yourself. How does one deal with having more knowledge than others? Well, this is, I think the best person to turn to for this is H. Spencer Lewis. In the Rosicrucian Manual, he said, attempt no direct reforms in the lives of others. Discover in yourself what needs correction and improve yourself, that by the light of your life, you may point the way to others. Proclaim yourself not as a master, but as a Rosicrucian student, ever a student, eternally. So it is an important part of the Rosicrucian tradition that we remain humble as we grow in our knowledge. Okay, next question. One's thoughts has wings, have powers, but we have emotions and they create thoughts. Sometimes bad emotions can create bad thoughts. If one's thought process are developed, how do we control our emotions? Well, we can program our autonomic nervous system to create chemicals through our thoughts. And we've discussed this in a number of teleconferences. Just recently, we had the teleconferences transforming our habits and behaviors and our inner state. Here's another question about the autonomic nervous system. And there are techniques that we can use to stimulate the autonomic nervous system. One is to focus on our breath. We just breathe normally, and that signals to the autonomic nervous system that everything's okay. There's no need to increase our heart rate or our respiratory rate. We can also tug on our earlobes, do it just like this. When we do this, this is a connection to the vagus nerve. This is this long nerve that goes from our brain way down in our body. And this helps to calm the system, to calm the autonomic nervous system. I mentioned earlier that we can interlace our fingers over our solar plexus. We can do this in order to stay calm in a challenging situation. You can just sit like that, have your fingers interlaced on your solar plexus just above the navel. We can intone the vowel sound May, spelled M-E-H, but it's pronounced like the month of May. And if we are, we want to stay calm in our autonomic nervous system, and we can envision a future situation that may be, we anticipate may be challenging, and decide what character you will maintain during that meeting. So anticipate what may come up that may be challenging and may knock your autonomic nervous system off balance, and be prepared for that. Okay, can our intake of things like sugar and salt influence our ability to meditate, and also caffeine? So in 2019, the second issue of the Rosicrucian Digest was focused on radiant health, and it talks about the challenges that certain things we ingest cause for our body. So you can experiment with this yourself and see if it's beneficial to you to eat sugar or a lot of salt or caffeine, especially if you're trying to meditate. Anything that stimulates you, which sugar and caffeine do, will make it more challenging to meditate. And many Rosicrucians, before long meditation periods or before sanctum periods or initiations, will not eat right beforehand. Even if it's not a stimulating food like sugar, just eating at all, then your body needs to focus on digestion. Okay, just a couple of more questions here. Are there certain texts that I should read? And I think this is from someone who is not yet a member, because Rosicrucians read our monographs in a particular order. And if you're talking about the books that are available online, on Rosicrucian.org, we have all of the entire library of Rosicrucian books is available online for free. So you can read any Rosicrucian book, just choose the one that most interests you, start there. And Rosicrucian Digest, we have all of the Rosicrucian Digest online. These two are free, so just choose whatever calls out to you. And the last question here, hold on. In the 1920s, H. Spencer Lewis created and worked in a healing lab at Rosicrucian Park using a variety of healing techniques. We understand that he realized much success with the people he worked on. Could you shed some light on why this healing lab was ended, and if there is any thought given to resurrect it? So my understanding is that the healing lab ended with H. Spencer Lewis's transition, and then which occurred in 1939. And then Ralph Lewis had his hands full. I mean, here was the Depression was still going on, and World War II was looming. And I think it just wasn't the priority that it had been for H. Spencer Lewis. And I'd like to open the chat now to ask, what would a Rosicrucian healing lab look like to you? If there was a Rosicrucian healing lab, what would that include? So feel free to share we're going to open the chat and just imagine that for a moment. If there was a Rosicrucian healing lab, what would that look like to you? So we've got calm music. Sixth-degree practical workshops, crystals and candles, chanting, incense. It would include touch healing, light and color. I'm going to keep this chat, a spa setting, meditations, sound therapy, prayer, soft seats, quiet people, perfume, vowel sounds, Zoom, pyramid shape, Egyptian altar, light and sound frequencies, books on prayer, chair, research science, tuning forks, pure bioenergy, Reiki, instructions on practical living, such as losing weight, biofeedback. It's going so fast now. Alkaline diets, transformative temple, lounge chairs, fresh air, sound therapy with plants, dry herbs, light color, herbalism, scientifically controlled experiments, the violet room, roses, excellent, healing, water therapy, a positive, supportive, relaxing, Rosicrucian themed atmosphere, pure drinking water, acceptance and love, aura detection, nothing, recordings, group meditations, laughter. Wow, we may have just gotten something going here. Again, the love of our masters, past and present. Someone wrote, this sounds beautiful. It does sound beautiful. So I'm going to keep these notes, and again, who knows what might manifest. So let me check all these questions and make sure that I wanted to answer every single question. I think we got them all. Okay.